Math Cats presents Interview. Have fun.
Hi everyone. So we're going to be doing our first interview with someone from our school, and it's going to be another math teacher, but it's not going to be about math. It's going to be our first author, Dr. Thomas, because she wrote a book. So, yeah.
So, what is your book about?
My book is about a character named Funny Boy who has autism, and he is going to a birthday party at his best friend's house, and his friends are going to be there as well. So the whole book talks about his situation dealing with social inclusion and just making sure that he's a part of the group and feel welcome.
That's really cool. So, yeah, I don't have I kind of want to ask you a question about the book. Is it going to be like a children's book or like an adult book?
It's a children's book. It's definitely a children's book. It's
Okay.
The characters are animal based, and the
cool.
thing about the book is that the illustrations is that my youngest son Alex, he created these characters, and we sent them to an illustrator, and she re-imaged it in her own likeness so that it could be a part of the book. So his characters that he's been working on his own, that he fully created by himself, are going to be used in this book. That's what makes it so special and personal.
Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So was it stressful writing a book and balancing a full-time job at the same time?
Yes, of course it was. At the same time, this was a very, very important book for me. I'm very much a champion of autism awareness, and this is something that I wanted to do, and I felt like it could help people who have autism and families that support those individuals.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that, for sure.
Why did you decide to write a book?
So I decided to write a book because it's really an extension of my graduate studies. When I found out that my son had autism, there was not a lot of information about it out there. And every single time I tried to figure it out at the doctor's office, it was like a roadblock. So for me, in order to get the best help for my son, I had to figure it out on my own. I had to get as much information as I could, which is why I decided to tie my graduate studies into understanding autism. And that's how it came about, as an extension of that. I never had a chance to really focus on writing the book until now. And so this is the time, and I'm looking forward to getting that journey over and seeing what the public thinks about it.
Mm-hmm. So how did you begin your writing process?
I began my writing process by reflecting on the experiences that my family had with my son. And because it was based on characters that he created naturally, I focused on some of the situations that were, I would say, a challenge for him. And so for me, it was easy to kind of think about it in that way, but to make it a book that everyone could relate to was a little bit more of the challenge. And that's what I started focusing on and thinking about more.
Okay, cool.
Can you tell us a little bit about the hardest part of being an author?
Oh, the hardest part about being an author is probably making sure that it's effective in its messaging, and that it not only focuses on the target group, but has meaning that anyone that is reading it can relate to. And that for me is the biggest thing. This is not just about the community of people with autism or families that deal with them. It's for society, because people with autism walk in society every day, and autism awareness can sometimes be a struggle for folks who don't know about it. So for me, making sure that the messaging is effective and it's inclusive so that everyone in the community can, take something away from it is hugely important for me and hard to do. But I'm hoping that it gets across in this series that I'm writing.
That's great. So I think that it's so important to have from a young age an understanding of what autism is. So as a children's book, it can definitely build the bridge for neurotypicals as well. So that's really good.
Yes.
So what is it like to write about autism as a neurotypical?
For me, it wasn't difficult because I have 18 years of experience with my son. I'm a teacher, as you know, as well. So I work with students who have autism, and I understand it. I understand that mindset. For me, it's about making sure that people who don't have those experiences can understand it, so they can relate to it, and don't have any kind of negative views about it, or just ignorance, if you will. Does that make sense? I want to that those individuals who never had to relate to someone on the spectrum one-on-one understand how to approach them, understand what it means to be around them in their space, and be respectful on both sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah, total sense. That's perfect.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit about the topic of your book?
Yeah, so the topic is, first of all, this is book 1 of a series of 5. And I'm hoping to make sure that in each series that I capture a specific characteristic that is focused on autism. So this first series is just about social inclusion and autism awareness, making sure that we use all the strategies that we need to, just as individuals who are on the spectrum and who aren't, to make sure that you are growing as a person or as an individual. And one thing I like about the book is that any child that is reading it and they're in a classroom and they're sitting next to someone that does have autism, they're going to learn how to be respectful of their space, and also know how to approach them when it may be confusing for anybody not understanding that.
That's good. So what do you do when you have like a writing block, or like have you had a lot of those in your writing process?
I have it's not really more so of a writing block. It goes back to what I said before, making sure that messaging just is out there for someone. Anyone can be able to pull something from it and learn something from it and grow. So that is the difficult part. When I have those moments, I just go out to nature. I'm such a nature person. I love the earth, and if I can go outside and get around trees, get some sunlight, and come back in, I get inspired again to pick up the pen and start writing again. So that usually does it for me.
That's great. Yeah, I guess like pulling inspiration from your environment, that's perfect.
Right.
So what strategies do you recommend as like a writer? That's like the second part to my question.
Strategies know what it is that you are writing about, and make sure that you have some connection to it, that it's something that you believe in. I think that makes it easier to get your messaging across. Whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you want to make sure that this is something that you really believe in, and that who is ever reading that book or that nonfiction novel can take something away from it and hopefully grow as an individual. That's what I think is important for anybody in any walk of life. You want to be able to have an experience, take something away from it so you can grow from it. And that's what I'm hoping that this series does for people.
Okay, so kind of back to the basics here though. What is autism and why is it an important issue?
I will give you my personal definition of what I believe autism is and whether it's an issue or not. Autism is a condition that some individuals are born with, and it can affect them in different ways. Sometimes it's behavioral, sometimes it's cognitive. But the main thing is being able to understand that individual. A lot of times in my experiences with my son, he fully understands what is going on in his environment. Being able to articulate it can be difficult sometimes. And for someone who does not understand what that space looks like, it could come off as something totally foreign to what they're thinking. So for me, when I look at the definition of autism, it's a condition that some people are born with. It's just a matter of where they are on that broad spectrum and how they relate to society and how society relates to them.
So back to math, because this is a math video thing. How do you think math affects your book, if it affects your book at all?
It does. So this is an extension of my graduate studies. And of course, it was connected to math. And one of the strategies that my son has used to help him deal with social inclusion is called number patterns, number codes. So what we would do when we are out in our social environments, whether it's a family environment or if it's like going to the park or going to just an everyday grocery store type thing, I wanted to make sure that he didn't feel guilty about some of the ways that he was acting. And he would get that way. If he feels like he's done something that was not socially acceptable, he would internalize it, and it would be a trigger for meltdowns and things like that. So one of the things that we talked about doing was attaching a number code to a behavior. So it was like a reminder, if you will, to kind of help him think differently about the situation so he wouldn't internalize it. So in terms of math and how this is associated with it, number patterns for him and routines were something that he could relate to. And it just became his thing. Even now at 18, all I have to do is just give him a sequence of numbers. They have a meaning behind it that helps him think differently about a situation. So he doesn't internalize it, have an emotional breakdown or a meltdown or a trigger even. Mm-hmm. So that's the connection into the book itself.
That's good. So is that like in the book, like in the children's book as well?
It is.
So I do have one more question. So how does math affect your everyday life?
Oh my goodness, are you kidding me, Gigi? You know how it affects my life, being the math teacher that I am. Well, you've probably heard me say this before in class. Math students will say, when am I ever going to use this in life? It's never about having a specific problem to solve or an application to do. It's all about being able to critically think and problem solve. And that's what, especially when you're talking about algebra, that's what algebra does for students. It gives you a chance to think through situations. What is the best approach? How can I get around this difficult challenge, if you will? And that in itself lends itself across the board to different areas of math. So in general, that's how it is basically good for people to understand what math does for them. Critical thinking, problem-solving skills, it gives you that leverage when you're trying to deal with any challenges that you have. Even though it's not number-based, it doesn't have to be number-based.
Exactly. Okay, so that's like all our questions. Thank you so much for doing this. This was like such a learning experience, and it was fantastic.
Thank you so much for sharing that information. It makes me feel so good because, I think about my own son, and he does the exact same thing. If we can continue that kind of attitude, I think we'll have more of an autism awareness along the way.
Yeah.
Quack!